Everybody to the May 16th committee meetings of the RTM. Can we stand and say the pledge and stay standing for a moment of silence for the McGrath family, the Fairfield Prep student who was fatally stabbed to death this weekend, and also all those up in Buffalo, the families of those who lost their lives at the supermarket. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Also, I'd like to just take note that it is National Police Week. So let's remember all of those policemen who lost their lives in the line of duty, and also thank our public workers. It's National Public Works Week. So we're going to kick it off. Number one is the parking regulations, the town's Planning and Zoning Commission. Mr. Wendt, are you here? I see you on my screen, so the floor is yours, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM. My name is Jim Wendt. I'm the planning director for the town. Last legislative session, the Connecticut General Assembly adopted Public Act 21-29 with a very long title, an act concerning the Zoning Enabling Act, accessory apartments, training for certain land use officials, municipal affordable housing plans, and Commission on Connecticut's Development and Future. Within that 28-page bill, there were two provisions that mandated certain language be adopted by municipalities and their zoning regulations, but provided a provision for communities to opt out. That has to do with the required number of parking for residential units and separately a provision for accessory apartment units. So I'll talk about the parking piece first. The act requires that local zoning regulations, and I will quote, shall not require more than one parking space for each studio or one bedroom dwelling unit, or more than two parking spaces for each dwelling unit with two or more bedrooms, unless the community opts out in accordance with the act. So the opt-out provision for this and the following one that I will talk about shortly requires an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the Planning and Zoning Commission, which has already occurred. And then to complete the opt-out process, the RTM must also approve opting out by a 2/3 majority. The Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously voted to opt out of the parking language on February the 8th. And the reason for that is our current regulations provide a varying number of parking spaces depending on the zone and the number of dwelling units. Much of our parking standards meet or demand less parking than what this regulation requires. However, there are certain developments in the town that our zoning regulations require more parking. And those are typically developments that are not near transit, that require, if there are more than 10 dwelling units, require 2.5 to 3 unit parking spaces per unit. So for the most part, we comply with what the state mandate requires, but the Planning and Zoning Commission believes that there are larger developments that are not near transit that warrant additional parking than prescribed by the state maximums. So the Planning and Zoning Commission voted to opt out. The second opt-out that's on your agenda is with respect to accessory apartments. In the same bill, the act requires local zoning regulations allow for the creation of accessory apartments and then prescribes some default language. We have had in Fairfield accessory apartments since the mid-'80s, and we've got over 170 apartments in inventory presently. And our accessory apartments were amended in February of 2021, in March of this year, and again, are fairly similar to what the state prescribes, but there are two key provisions in the default language which differ from our local regulations, which gave rise to the Planning and Zoning Commission choosing to opt out. Firstly, the state required language would require an accessory apartment to be permitted in any single-family residence, regardless of what zone it's located in. And presently, recently, the Planning and Zoning Commission updated the regulations to allow accessory apartments in the B and C zones. But for example, we do not permit accessory apartments in the Beach District. So given that unique and discrete geography, the Planning and Zoning Commission felt that accessory apartments should remain prohibited in the Beach District. Similarly, the statutory language requires that accessory apartments be permitted in detached structures in any district. In the Planning and Zoning Commission has permitted detached units in our larger zones, the 2-acre, 1-acre, and half-acre zones, but believes that detached units aren't appropriate in the smaller residential districts. So while we have a long history of supporting accessory apartments, for those two reasons, the commission voted unanimously to opt out of that language as well. So, Mr. Moderator, that is a very brief summary of these two opt-out provisions that the Planning and Zoning Commission has unanimously voted to opt out from, and we are requesting you give that equal consideration and hope you support opting out. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you or other members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wendt. We have a question from Representative Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Lambert, District 3, through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Wendt. Good evening, Mr. Wendt. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Good evening.
So I think taking the last one first, the ADUs, is there a specific, I know that the Planning and Zoning Commission voted because it felt it was best for the Beach District, for example, to not have ADUs. Is there a rationale as to why that area was specifically designated as an area not to have ADUs in it?
Yes, I think there's several reasons. Firstly, the lots are generally very small and narrower. The Beach District is a very discrete geography, as I said, basically Fairfield Beach Road west of Reef Road and Pine Creek Avenue. There are many cases where we have multiple dwelling units already on those parcels, and it's in a floodplain district, or it's in a flood zone. There's challenges in evacuations, in storm situations. So creating more rental units with folks that may be transient in nature, not as familiar with the dangers or evacuation procedures, felt that it would be best to leave that an area where those types of units would be prohibited.
When it comes to parcel size, though, I mean, a lot of accessory dwellings are already built into existing structures. So regardless of size, if somebody wants to, for example, convert an apartment above their garage to an accessory apartment, that structure is already there by and large, right? So, I mean, how does the idea that there would be a smaller lot size or parcel size change how somebody's able to use their property?
Well, it doesn't necessarily change how they can use their property, but in terms of the intensity and density of the number of occupants of that property would be impacted by the ability to have an apartment.
So it's the idea, I guess, that the beach wouldn't be an appropriate area for that just based on density. Is that it?
Correct.
Okay. And when it comes to detached units, uh, what specifically are the areas in which detached units would not be permitted?
Presently, any zone that requires a lesser lot size than 1/2 an acre.
And that's anywhere in town, not just the beach.
Correct.
Now,
An attached unit can be built or existing or created within the existing dwelling in any of those districts. It's just its freestanding detached unit needs to have a 1/2 an acre or more.
and is the concern that there would be some sort of additional builds done on those smaller parcels by people who want to have detached units? Or again, are we talking about parcels that already have existing detached structures that aren't going to be allowed to use that for accessory apartments?
Well, it's a little of both. I think what the commission's concern was is they wanted to take an incremental approach to detached units. The majority of detached structures that have historical occupancy, like old carriage houses, for example, are by and large in the larger districts. In the smaller zones, you still have the opportunity to create an accessory apartment within your existing dwelling or build an addition to your existing dwelling to do it. The commission was just uncomfortable initially making a broader opportunity until they have a better idea of how many of these types of applications we might see.
Is this going to be studied at all? What this incremental approach might do, so in the future we could feel more confident about allowing, detached ADUs or accessory apartments in the beach area a possibility? I'm just wondering if this is part of a grander scheme. Are we actually going to be taking a serious look at this to expand those opportunities, or is this a one-off change?
No, I think the commission has had a series of amendments to the accessory apartment regulations back in 2020 and last year, or several months ago, to do just that, to expand that opportunity. Prior to the most recent amendment, the detached units were only permitted in the 2-acre zone. They were most recently granted permission in the 1-acre and half-acre districts only several months ago. So we're going to keep an eye on this. This has been kind of a joint effort. I will give credit to the Fairfield senior advocates in the Affordable Housing Committee, who have been proponents of additional housing opportunities that made applications to the commission to consider these additional changes. And so this is by no means set in stone as the last amendment the commission would ever consider. We're just choosing to opt out of the state mandated language.
Which would be in some ways more lenient than what we have currently in place now, based on how we're choosing to go about this, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And as for parking, the first part of the resolution that or the motion that we're considering tonight is, correct me if I'm wrong, the areas in which this would be impacted would be specific. What is it? It's a specific types of zone in which this is targeted, right? The designed residence district.
Correct. I think that the parking regulation state mandated language would have fairly minimal impact, because market forces more than anything else are going to dictate how many parking spaces a builder or developer is going to provide. For example, the regulations say we can't require more than 2 parking spaces for a dwelling unit with 2 or more bedrooms. I haven't seen in recent memory a single family house, for example, being built that doesn't have parking for at least 2 vehicles. So some of that is going to be self-regulating. It's just that there are, as I stated before, our parking maximums are less than the state mandated threshold for our downtown transit-oriented and transit-oriented development near Metro Center. But it's just there could be an occasion which a denser development that is not located proximate to transit might warrant more than 2 parking spaces per unit, and that's why the commission voted to opt out. But yes, to the short answer to your question, it would be a pretty limited applicability situation.
And I guess the question I have is what difference then does 3 parking spaces versus 2 parking spaces make? Why do we have to opt out of this language? What's the
Well,
point?
by opting out of the language, the commission wouldn't have any discretion to require a greater number of spaces than 2.
Right, but why do we need to require more than 2?
Because it was the Planning and Zoning Commission's consideration. There may be developments in which it might be warranted to have more than 2, and they chose not to be boxed in by the state mandated limit.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moderator. No further questions from me.
Thank you, Representative Lambert. Representative Georgiadis, please.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9, through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Wendt. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. I think you know I live in the area we call the beach area. I've lived here for 31 years. I'm very aware of the various ADUs that exist in the district already. You refer to a beach district, and maybe I haven't been following my zoning language closely enough. And I think you answered my part of my question by saying that it's Reef Road and West. Is that how you define the beach district?
The
And
beach,
is this term beach district strictly defined anywhere so that it doesn't move all around the beach area, which is my district, District 9?
the beach district is a defined district like any other zoning district. It's mapped on the town's approved zoning map. So it is a
Okay.
much smaller geography than what you might see referred to as the beach area in a real estate ad. There are many, many neighborhoods that get advertised through real estate listings that you're all familiar with that aren't necessarily defined zoning districts. The beach district is a defined zoning district, and it is mapped on the official zoning map. And it is the south side of Fairfield Beach Road, west of the Durrell Pavilion, all the way down to the end of Fairfield Beach Road, and includes most of Pine Creek Avenue and some of Old Dam Road. So it's a pretty specific, it is a discretely mapped, defined district.
Okay. Because I know I've had meetings with you and other town officials regarding parking on Reef Road and a variety of places that are not ADUs, and the parking is not restricted. So you're just concerned with the parking as it is termed with alternate dwelling units, not necessarily this new construction where you have 5 bedrooms and 5 college students and 5 cars and their boyfriends or the girlfriends, and you have 8 cars all parking on Reef Road.
Yeah, Reef Road, for the most part, is in a B district, which allows single and two-family dwellings. Our regulations presently would require a minimum of 2 parking spaces per unit. So a two-family house would need to be able to provide 4 off-street parking spaces. Some provide more than that, and that's not out of sync necessarily with what the state mandate is providing, saying we can't require more than 2. So in that case, there really wouldn't be much of an impact because our regulations in that case on Reef Road, for example, are in sync with what the state is prescribing as a maximum.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Georgiadis. Representative Barris.
I believe he withdrew his question, Mark.
I did withdraw
yeah.
my question. Thank you.
I apologize. I'm still up. It was too high. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Wendt? Mr. Wendt, you said this is a 2/3 vote for us?
Yes, to opt out requires a 2/3 vote of this body. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you for tonight, and we're going to move on to the Rooster River, item number 2 on our presentation list tonight. I believe Mr. Hurley is not available. Mr. Baldwin, I heard you here, I think.
I am here, Mr. Moderator.
Well, thank you. So you're going to present this to us?
I'll do my best.
Okay.
Good evening. This is, technically speaking, an interlocal agreement between the City of Bridgeport and the town of Fairfield, which is why it's come before you. And it's part of the kind of the master plan for Rooster River mitigation efforts. And this part of it deals specifically with the Fairchild Wheeler golf course and the planned watershed retention projects that are going to take place if this is approved by both the city and the town at the Fairchild Wheeler golf course, which, as you know, is located in the town of Fairfield, but owned by the city of Bridgeport. There have been extensive studies already performed by Malone and McBroom, and this memorandum of understanding sets forth the parameters, responsibilities, financial and otherwise, between the two parties, the town and the city of Bridgeport.
Thank you, sir.
It's for both design and also the construction of the project. I'm happy to entertain any questions or elaborate further.
Thank you, Attorney Baldwin. Are there any questions from the body? All right, going once, twice, three times. Thank you, Mr. Baldwin.
You're welcome.
We're going to move on to item number 3, which is the police CBA. Mr. Schmidt, CFO, you're presenting for us.
Good evening. Thanks, Mr. Moderator.
Good evening.
You have in the backup, you have a red line version of the contract between the collective bargaining agreement between the police and the town. There's also another backup document which gives the highlights of that agreement. And I'm going to quickly go through those highlights. There are basically five changes in this. It's pretty straightforward. 2 of them are related to funeral leave. There was a concern about the way the funeral leave language reads and that it may be too restrictive because it only allows the leave to happen between the time of death and the service. And so what this language does is it opens it up to be to allow to mourn and attend funeral memorial services. So if there's a case where there could be a service that doesn't happen for months in some cases, and so we wanted to allow some flexibility so that person can take the leave either at the time of death and or when the service actually happens. The second change in funeral leave is to add an acceptable reason for leave, and that reason is due to a miscarriage or stillbirth. That the same eligibility for leave would apply as it does with a death of a family member. With regard to wages, the increases are in there. You'll see those in the backup. So this is a prospective agreement, unlike a lot of the agreements that we're doing recently. This one starts with FY23, and it's 2.75% per year over the next 3 years. So for FY23, 24, and 25. You can see the at least in the FY23, because that's the only year for which we have a budget at this point. You can see the impact there in the backup. The dollar amount is about $345,000. There would be another impact on salary, which has to do with college credits. And to me, this is a win for both sides because we are always trying to encourage additional education. And so there was an agreement to increase the incentives, the monetary incentives for college credits at different levels. And then finally, the last component is a increase in the health insurance premiums, contributions on the part of the police officers. Currently, that percentage is at 17%. It'll remain at 17% next year, the following year, and in FY25, it would be increased to 18%. It's my understanding that the union has approved this. It was voted on the 11th of May, and it was approved overwhelmingly. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Any questions? I don't see any in the chat right now. Representative Vergara.
Hi.
I'm sorry, Jill, just wait 1 second. I'm sorry. Representative Gale, you put in a question, but that was for Mr. Baldwin and it was too late. So I think you should go in and read up about what the whole project is on your own. Thank you. Representative Vergara.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jill Vergara for District 7. Hi, Jared. Thanks so
Hello,
much
how
for
are you?
presenting to us. I appreciated the memo. It hit most of the points that I wanted to see. So thank you for that. And when you say that the union approved it overwhelmingly, did you say, does that mean unanimously?
My understanding is that there was one no vote.
Okay. And with the changes to the contract for the college incentives, those amounts correlate to dollars. Like it would be for 30 credits completed, the old contract was $100 and now it's $150.
That's correct.
Okay. And then the cumulative impact over the 3 years of this contract is like 1.07 million.
We don't have obviously we don't have budget set for FY24 and 25 yet. That sounds about right. That would be about there.
Okay. Thanks a lot. That's it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Vergara. Are there any other questions? Okay. I think I let it go long enough. So seeing none, thank you, Mr. Schmidt. And we'll go on to item number 4, which is the townwide facility upgrade. And we should have Mr. Ryan with us tonight. Or are you on your own, Mr. Schmidt?
Mr. Ryan should be on.
I see his name.
Yes, I'm here now. Yep.
Now I see his face. Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Jared, are you doing a little intro or?
Why don't I, Mr. Moderator, if I could, I know it's not on the agenda and it wasn't on the Board of Finance agenda, but if I could do a very quick kind of overview of all the projects that are in here, and just to give some context to everything that's here, if that's acceptable to you. Mr. Moderator.
Mark, that's a question for you. There you go.
Sorry. Sorry. Say it again. I didn't get it. I'm having a little trouble with my internet tonight.
Okay. I was just going to do a quick overview to give some context, because I know there are a number of projects that are on the agenda for tonight. So I was going to just do a quick 2 or 3 minute overview, which starts on page 112, if that's okay.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. So if you go to page 112 of the PDF in the backup that's before you. So again, this is just to give you context. This top section of this page is the 22-23 projected cash requirements for a number of different projects, including some that have already been authorized and the ones that are before you and will be before you on the 23rd. In particular, that first line, Exhibit 1, gives a total amount of all of these projects. The one, actually two corrections that I would make, which have changed since the creation of this document, is that the WPCA projects have been removed. Those two will hopefully come before the boards later on, probably sometime in June. So the total amount was 19 million. It's down to about 14 million now, 14, 15 million. There were also, in that top section, you see that there were other projects that have been approved already. There was 3.6 million that all the boards approved in non-recurring capital for 22, 23. And then there, below that, for exhibits 3 and 4, there are projects that were approved last year, but we haven't issued bonds for them yet. So there's potential for all of these, including the ones that are on your agenda for the 23rd, there's a potential that we would bond for these projects next month, middle or end of next month. And the total amount is broken down there also by the entity, by the town, Board of Ed, and WPCA. Obviously, WPCA is not in that mix anymore. Though I will point one thing out about the Board of Education, because this and the way this is presented, there is one project in particular for the Board of Education that's a large project that's going to be the costs related to it will occur over probably a 3-year period, and Angelus will address that when the particular item comes up. So the amount that would be that you would vote on to approve, to commit to, would be approximately $22 million. However, the amount that you see there is just for this first year and the first component of this, which would be the design of the project. And then the rest of the costs would come into play in the second and third years. And with that, unless there are questions about this overview broadly about bonding capital, I will turn it back over to James Ryan, and he can start with the first project.
Okay, good evening, everybody. James Ryan, Building Maintenance Manager with the town. My backup starts on page 117, but this is a request is a result of the town-wide facility audit performed last year by Silver Petroselli and Associates. The audit provided a long-range capital plan that analyzed the current facilities code, compliance, accessibility, and ongoing and future maintenance needs. This request would address the priority one, the most important items in the 17 buildings that were pointed out in the capital needs assessment report. And some examples of the priority one items are life safety, like fire alarm panel upgrades, electrical emergency lighting upgrades, some accessibility ADA compliance, some structural needs like wind resistance studies and surveys, and then some HVAC air quality improvements. And some of these items are going to require, involving and engaging an architect, an engineering firm that, through the request for proposal, to design and prepare bid specifications to go out to bid for some of these projects together. You see in your backup here, starting on page 117, This is Silver Petroselli's report. And it has a nice introduction that basically says the purpose and what they did, the process of how they did it, and the codes that that each building needs to follow. If you jump down scroll down back to the bottom of this report, and it goes down to page 378 on the report. It's a large report, so bear with me. And it basically touches on each building, and they went around with electrical engineers and structural engineers and HVAC engineers, and basically just went and surveyed each building. But here it is on page 496 of your backup. It's actually 380 of this plan, and it gives a nice breakdown per building. As far as the priority ones, the twos, the threes, and the fours. That's on page 380 of the report and 496. And then the next page is a 10-year plan where they, basically forecast the next 10 years, there's going to be, escalations of, construction costs and soft costs. But, because we're so close, that's where, that's the number that we are pretty much asking for, minus some ARPA money that we got for the senior center and some money left over from this audit that we asked for last year. And I think that pretty much summarizes what I have, if there's any questions.
Mr. Moderator, I think is frozen.
Representative Spolier, am I back now?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Sorry about that. I definitely having a wonky internet tonight. We had a question first from Representative Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Representative Kuhn, District 7, for both of you. Can you tell me what the total amount is for HVAC spending?
The total amount for HVAC spending in this priority one ask?
Yeah.
Not handy, but I could follow up with an email for sure.
Roughly.
Roughly?
Yeah. Well, let me rephrase my question. Is it, I'm going to withhold this question until we get to the education because it actually is relevant to the HVAC expenditures there. So I'll hold it until then. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so this isn't including the schools, right? This is just the town side.
Right, but I'm curious about HVAC and whether we had pursued any HVAC purchase agreements where, like a PPA, somebody buys it for you and gets the tax benefits, and your out of pocket is very low.
We haven't pursued that, no. We're not in any agreement now, and we have not pursued that, no.
Okay, I'll bring that up again when we talk about the schools. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Kuhn. Representative Vergara.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jill Vergara for District 7. Thanks for presenting to us. I noticed in our backup that Sullivan Independence Hall, there was a mold issue identified, and I didn't remember, I don't remember if it was labeled a level 1 issue. Is that issue being addressed in this first round of renovations?
Well, it was addressed 2 years ago, and it came up in this survey to re-inspect the sheetrock in the basement, but that hasn't been addressed yet. It can get addressed with this request.
Okay, and we're monitoring the whole building for any signs of mold, because once it's an issue anywhere, I think that it can move and spread. So our Sullivan Independence is being monitored for this.
Correct.
Okay. And I was also surprised that more wasn't being done to Old Town Hall. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised that the report reflected good conditions in Old Town Hall, but knowing I've used the meeting rooms in the basement, and also knowing that the assessor's office had mushrooms growing in their rugs, I'm surprised that there aren't more issues to be dealing with in that building. So I just wanted to make sure that everything was really checked thoroughly for any kind of air issues and mold.
Yes, so mold at Old Town Hall, that was addressed, but these are priority 1 issues that are, more fire safety, emergency lighting, ADA compliant, and but that was addressed when that came up right away.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I see mold as being a high priority issue, that it could really expand in cost. And so I'm glad that the town was on top of it, and I hope we continue to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Vergara. Representative Gale. You're muted, Representative Gale.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Thank you. Is the number on this resolution being changed? Is the 1.9 million no longer the figure?
No, that is the figure with, if you look at what should be the figure based off of this survey,
And
on page 497 of your backup,
497?
497 of your backup, PDF 497.
Okay.
It's actually 381 on the report.
Okay. Got it.
So you see the first year that it's in red, priority 1s was actually a 3,083,778. That's reduced because if you go back, and that's kind of why I asked Jared to just do a quick overview of his presentation. We got approved for ARPA money for the senior center, and we have money left over from this ask of $400,000 last year. So with the ARPA money, 850, with 250, with that, subtract that from the 3,083, and that's our ask.
Okay, and so this resolution that we're currently being asked to consider, is this only the urgent priority 1 items?
First year priority ones, correct.
First year priority ones. Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Moderator, you're muted.
I'm not muted. Am I back?
Yes, yeah, you are.
I'm not muted. I just, my connection keeps going in and out. Any other questions for Mr. Ryan?
There's several on there's several on the list, Mr. Moderator.
Okay,
You
I
want
think Mr. Garskoff was next, right? Representative Garskoff, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Josh Garskoff from District 5. Sorry, Mr. Ryan, you mentioned a $400,000 from last year or something. Can you explain what that is?
So last year we asked for $400,000 for non-recurring to do a townwide facility audit. And that's what that's part of the backup. That is the report that we are referring to. And that is where we are getting this request from.
Thank you. So I'm just curious, is it standard procedure to roll that money forward to a new, I mean, I understand it's a related project, but we approved that money for an audit and this is money for actual implementation. So would it not be appropriate to just sort of like not bond that 400,000 and ask for 400,000 more in this case? And I'm concerned about rolling one request into another.
I can answer that.
Okay.
So yeah, the original request and the approval was for 400,000, and the resolution as it was written last year was broad enough, and there was the anticipation that the 400,000 would probably more than cover the audit, and that the whatever remained after the audit was done, that funding would be used to start doing some of this work. And so well, yes, I think under normal situation, if there were a very narrow resolution that was written, that it would be difficult to repurpose the money. But in this case, we anticipated this situation, and so we're able to utilize the remaining money from that $400,000, which is $284,000, to start the work.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Garskoff. Representative Zesma, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Liz Zesma, District 4. Through you, my question is about Penfield. I see a number of items on the list for them, a few that would be for year 2. So, in general, what is the status of Penfield? I believe it's coming offline in October. And how do these items, how are they impacted by its status? If we could get an update on that, I'd appreciate it.
So that was brought up in the Board of Finance meeting as well. I can probably answer that. There are no priority 1 requests on my list there. I think there was something there for roof drains and that came up as a priority 1. It was handled right there and then on the day of the survey. As far as the future plans for Penfield, there's ongoing meetings with my directors are having with FEMA and EPA on next steps. I believe the plans are to come up with a couple of concepts and bring it to the public. But that's yet to be determined when.
So the earliest, assuming that you could go ahead and do it, would be year 2 on some of those items?
Well, yeah, and I'm not asking for year 2 tonight, but
No,
right. So that some of the year 2 items might come off of the Penfield pavilion, or they might not regard, and if we keep the locker room side, there's a couple of concepts that are still, yet to be decided on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Zesma. Anybody else have a question for Mr. Ryan and Mr. Schmidt? All right, I'm not seeing any, so thank you, Mr. Ryan and Mr. Schmidt, for that. We're going to move on to item number 5, which is the emergency radio bonding. Chief Calamaris and Mr. Schmidt, who seems to be the star tonight, you're on the rest of these, or co-star. So who wants to start, Chief?
I'll defer to Chief to start.
Okay. Is Chief here? Chief Calamaris. I don't know if I see him on the list here.
Yeah, I don't see him on there.
Well, Jared,
we can try to get a hold of him, but I can start.
do you want to start? Do you want to just
Yeah.
go to the tide gates then?
No, I can give a decent overview of the radio project.
Okay.
So this, I think, as people are aware, has been on agendas in the past, I believe since about 2017. And what this would do is, connect the town system into a statewide system. The benefits would be that it would help to close some gaps where there are traditionally gaps in different buildings and different segments of the town, and so that we wouldn't have to worry about those gaps existing anymore, and also would help to create direct connections between the whether it's the departments to the town police, or Fairfield Town Police to another town, or to the state. It will help with those connections. So the total amount is $7 million. We were fortunate enough that we applied for a grant to Senator Blumenthal, and that grant was approved for $3.5 million. So half of the $7 million is covered by the grant, and the $3.5 million that we're requesting for approval would be bonded.
Okay, is that basically it from you, Jared?
That's basically it.
Okay. Are there any questions from the body? Because at this moment, I see none in the chat. All right, looks like everybody's okay with that. So let's then move on to the item number 6, the tide gate bonding. I think, is Mr. Bishop not available tonight? That's you again, Jared?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, this one I would want to wait for Mr. Bishop to weigh in on this one. So let me see if I can get a hold of him.
Is Mr. Cotell here?
Yes, I am.
All right, just trying to line up. I saw Mr. Calabrese And I think I saw Mr. Papa George as well. All right, let's go to item number 7. John, why don't you start us off on the transfer station bonding, please?
Sure, thank you. Good evening. This is for transfer station repairs. It's a 40-plus-year-old building. 2 years ago, $250,000 was approved. That took care of electrical services, lighting, bathrooms, and roof replacement. That work has been completed. So we are continuing forward. This stems from Silver Petroselli survey of the facility back in September of 2020. So they were addressing the first critical needs, and now we're continuing on. This involves replacement of the doors, overhead doors, drains, stairwell, masonry repairs, some flue pipe removal, exhaust systems with proper detectors, and some repairs to the tipping floor. And with that, I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Should I play some Jeopardy music while we wait for the answers? All right, I guess you did a brilliant job there, Mr. Cattell. So
thank you very much.
We're gonna, Jared, have you gotten in touch with Mr. Bishop?
I have not. And I don't think we'll be able to get a hold of him this evening.
Well, we'll listen to it next week at the regular meeting. Okay.
All right.
All right, Mr. Calabrese, the RLMS turf field bonding. You have the floor.
Good evening, everybody. Jared, I believe Mr. Bishop was away today. I spoke to him a little earlier tonight. Anyway, on to RLMS turf field. I don't believe this ever got to you guys in 2017 officially when I was trying to present this. This has been on the waterfall chart for a while. Anybody that's involved in our athletics or in politics at all has gotten email after email telling you what the conditions of our fields are like. So it shouldn't be any surprise to any of you that we're trying to upgrade our athletic facilities. So first one that we're trying to do is Ludlow Middle School. There's space at that field essentially for a little more than 1.5 fields. It's a little less than 2.5 fields. Ideally, we are looking to put a multi-purpose field back there. And if we can fit a baseball field, we'll gladly put a baseball field there. It does fit a softball field currently. We would like to overlay a softball field there. 2 reasons really: gives the high school a little flexibility. It gives our little leagues and girls little league some flexibility with their scheduling. And then our challenger program, our Fairfield Red Storm, would also finally have a home that they can play on that would be conducive to their abilities. This project does include the use of lights. Again, we thought this is a good site for lights due to its proximity to the high school, which already has lights. We've been talking about this one for a while, so here it is, and I'm happy to answer any questions for you guys.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's see, let me go back, sorry. Was it Representative Volk first?
Think I am.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jay Walk, District 5. And through you to Anthony, I have a question. How you doing, Anthony? Good to
Well,
see you again.
good seeing you.
Thank you for all your work that you've been doing. My question is, am I hearing this right, that there isn't going to be a regulation baseball field part of this project?
So with the layout of the current facility, there's not space to put a baseball field, a regulation high school baseball field. That's the major issue. Once we have a design firm on, if they can relocate the low ropes course, which backs up to I-95 and cut into the side of the hill, there potentially is enough space to put a high school baseball field there. So, we're going to try to fit whatever we can fit in there. If we can overlay a baseball diamond, then we're going to do that. If we can overlay a baseball and a softball, we're going to do that. Once we have the space turfed, really, it's just a matter of what lines you can fit in there. There's not much of an added cost for the number of fields you have laid on top of each other. Tomlinson's a good example of that. I think we have 11 fields laid out there.
Thank you, Anthony.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Wilk. Representative Bateson?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. How you doing, Anthony?
Good, Ed. How are you?
Good. Quick thing. I'm sorry I didn't read this presentation in depth. If I'm coming up Umpqua Road heading towards the schools, is this the first field on my left after I come out of underneath I-95?
Bridge. Yep, that's correct.
Okay. My recollection on this, this part of the property is this is traditionally, or it's always seemed to me to be wet down there.
It is.
So are we going to direct some resources in this project to try and solve these drainage issues, or what's your plan there? I mean, for some reason, it's always seemed damp there.
Yeah, with turf fields, drainage is a big part of that. So yes, this should alleviate the drainage issues that we have there. Obviously, we are very close to a wetland, so we're going to be regulated and restricted on what we can do. But I've been in talks with conservation, our new conservation director. And I don't think we're going to have an issue with that. So.
Okay. All right. Please, whatever you do with these contractors, I mean, I do want to see it solved because, I remember this in the 80s, and I'm sure there's other people here that even go back further with this issue. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Bateson. Representative Vergara.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jill Vergara, just for District 7. Hi, Anthony. Thanks for presenting to us. I have quite a few questions, so I'm okay if Mr. Moderator, you'd like to interrupt at any point and let me know if I should stop and give someone else a turn. I wanted to start out by saying that I watched the Board of Selectmen meeting, and I'm noticing I'm freezing. Can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go off video because it looks really weird right now, if that's okay. So I apologize. I watched the Board of Selectmen meeting and the Board of Finance meeting. I wanted to thank Selectman Flynn for his questions, and I wanted to echo his comment that it's clear that the town hasn't invested in our fields and that it hasn't maintained our fields properly. So I think that those are two very important points to make. And I am very supportive of investing in our athletic infrastructure. But I also want to make sure that we're maintaining everything properly, everything that our new installations properly. And I'd also like to make sure that we're maintaining our existing fields properly, because it's not acceptable the way it's been going. I heard you say that it's by wetlands, which I didn't realize. And where are the wetlands?
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Wetlands are right up against 95. There is a drainage detention pond right there.
Okay.
Cross country runs around it. I don't know how familiar you are with the area, but.
Okay. And we're not concerned about the drift of the infill into those wetlands?
No.
Okay. And so I spoke to you about this earlier in the day. I have issues with the way that you wrote up the 14 points, that brief memo that you gave to us on the project. So you had mentioned in that 14-point memo that you were planning on doing crumb rubber infill, and that is not consistent with what FAF has been telling all of their constituency and what the way people have been writing their letters. Everybody's been advocating pretty strongly for EnviroFill. Can you clarify what's going on? Because I heard you say during your presentations that it's going to be encapsulated crumb rubber.
So when I wrote this document back in 2017, that was the plan. Obviously, all I did was update the prices and some dates in there. Should have read it a little more carefully. But with that being said, like I stated to you earlier today, the way we're going to bid the documents are going to be, our number one choice is going to be EnviroFill. That is what we would like to use for these turf projects going forward. I am going to add as an add alternate, which means they will give us a price on encapsulated crumb rubber, which is a TPE type product that is different than crumb rubber, as I'm sure anybody who's done any of the research on this has seen. So, but that is, I have to get both prices given the environment that we're in.
Okay, but you based your estimate on EnviroFill?
That's correct.
Okay, because like I mentioned in my email, it's very different to me using EnviroFill versus encapsulated crumb rubber versus TPE. TPE is different than crumb rubber. It is like a virgin plastic.
Right.
And encapsulated crumb rubber is crumb rubber, and nobody's putting that stuff in. It has become clear that there are significant issues with crumb rubber, and all towns seem to be staying away from that.
So yeah, I would agree with you that towns are staying away from it, but I would also point out that there's not one study that's conclusive to say that there's any hazard in any of this at this point. Not saying that that's not going to change over the next several years, but as of right now, unless a town has specifically enacted a ban like Westport or Hartford, you know, we still have the option, any town would have the option to use crumb rubber as an infill. But again, that is the cheapest option. And I agree with you, we are staying away from it as a profession.
Yeah, I understand that we haven't set a baseline for our own town, but I just feel like we're smart enough to know this is not somewhere we want to go. No other towns are going there anymore. And I do disagree with you about the science, because there are studies showing very clearly breakdowns of all of the carcinogenic chemicals that they find in, and it's not surprising. These are literally, it's crumb rubber, so it's literally toxic substance. It's something that's regulated very strictly. It's hazardous. You cannot dispose of it in normal landfills. And so it just seems necessarily so. I'm not sure why we even really need to talk about that, honestly, because I feel like most communities have turned the page and they're thinking about alternatives like organic compounds like cork and coconut, or these other virgin products like virgin rubber or virgin plastic, or what I think is better, and I'm glad that you're looking into it, is EnviroFill. So I'm glad that you're.
I just want to clarify, the last 3 turf projects that we've done here in town have been that virgin rubber. That is what we've used. So for us to go to crumb rubber, a generic crumb rubber, is not something we would do. So I don't want you to misconstrue what I'm saying here.
Okay. All right. And I also wanted to check in about the underlayment system, because I read the background for Westport's projects. They put in TPE. They did 3 fields with TPE. They did 1 field with sand for their field hockey team. But they put in a special shock absorption pad that is supposed to give it longer life and also is safer for Gmax issues, and it guarantees a Gmax of 120 for 24 years. What are we doing for our underlayment?
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same. It depends on the infill that you use, but yes, it would be the same type of thing. For EnviroFill, you have to put a shock pad underneath it. For TPE, you have to put a shock pad underneath it.
Okay.
That's the standard practice now.
Okay, great. But even with that shock pad, we will still be testing for compaction and doing Gmax testing?
That's correct. We do that now on our other fields.
Great. How often do we do that?
I believe we're required to do it once a year.
Okay, good. So that's,
That's Jill?
yes.
All right. That's about 7 minutes, so just, you can come back. Let's let Mr. Ferentz, Representative
problem.
Ferentz, go. Can't steal all the questions.
All right, Hank Ferentz, District 8, through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Calabrese. Hello, Anthony.
Hi, Hank.
I have a comment rather than a question, and it goes back to what Mr. Representative Bateson was alluding to. I've been familiar with that field since the late 60s, and it's always been wet. And to my recollection, we've tried to repair it 3 times since the 60s. I think the last time it was done, which is when Ludlow Middle School was built, that's when we put the retention pond in, so there should be adequate drainage. I just want to make sure that we're aware of the fact that that field has always been a problem. And if we're going to spend a great deal of money to put down a turf field, that the drainage is engineered properly.
Yeah, I mean, the drainage is going to be done by an outside company, an outside engineering firm. So.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Ferentz. Representative Tallman, Peter Tallman.
Hi, thanks, Mark. Through you to Anthony. Just so people know too, this would be a huge benefit to Ludlow High School. And I think a lot of people haven't heard much about that. A lot of people know their facilities are lacking, and this would be a huge benefit. The other thing, Anthony, just so you know, Dr. Hatzis told me that the middle school said that rope swing could be removed.
Good.
The other one by the school with the tire up in the air that you practice field goals on, that has to stay, but I don't think that's in the way of anything. So hopefully a baseball diamond could fit. That would be awesome and much needed.
That's good news. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Representative Gale was next.
Thank you. Hannah Gale, District 6, through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Calabrese. Hello, Mr. Calabrese.
Hi, Hannah.
Now you know where I stand on this. We've had many exchanges on it, but I have sort of a couple of questions about drainage. You know, I remember when the first select woman described pulling up the baseball field at Gould Manor Park, and she said there was just absolutely no drainage under it. And so, you know, my question is, you know, has there been, or in your estimation, is there a possibility that there are certain fields that if we went and did the same kind of preparation work that they do for these turf fields, where they really dig down, put that barrier, the water permeable barrier, put the rocks on top, and then put a natural field on top of it, which would maintain a biome underneath the field. So the grass and the dirt underneath a natural field is a much better absorbent of water in general than obviously a turf field is. Might there be certain circumstances where that actually would benefit everyone in the long run? And I also do want to point out that we are just beginning to learn about forever chemicals, PFAs. I didn't send it to you this time because I've played you so many times in the past, but I sent to the rest of the RTM a paper on the fact that the plastic grass itself has these PFAs in it, and it's going to be a very long time before we know about those, because any environmental risk, it takes decades before you have, enough epidemiological research to make a definite declaration. I'm sorry if I confused the question, but I hope
Oh,
you can.
no. Your second part was appreciated, and I do appreciate not getting the same documents again. I have read them plenty of times from you. But back to the original question slash comment about the drainage, and are there fields in town that would benefit from the same type of work that we did at Gould Manor? Yeah, there are a few. Oldfield School, Oldfield Senior Center, the soccer field there actually drains really well. The sub base there, and that's almost in a wetland as it backs up to the marsh. So we've got evidence of fields that, when they're built properly with the proper sub base, they can drain very well. There are other locations. Gould Manor was one of them. Dwight Elementary School, their upper field is another really good example of a bad draining field. When we do a perk test there, there's no flow. So, a lot of times that has to do with the makeup of the soil. So, yes, could some of these fields, could we spend, an extensive amount of money on some of them and try to make them drain better? Absolutely. Will we have to go back in and redo that every so often? Yes, there's no doubt about that.
And I guess a question like regarding funding, it's obviously we can bond any of these turf fields as capital improvements, but is there a bigger issue getting funding if we were going to, because I although I respect your opinion, if that same water permeable barrier went in, that same rocks on top of that, I think that would actually last for quite a long time, the way it does with the turf fields. But is it harder to get funding for that because it's not exactly a capital improvement? It's not a capital improvement.
I'm unsure, honestly. I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gill. Representative Havey?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Lisa Havey, District 6. Question to you, Mr. Calabrese. It's a brief question. Are all shock pads created equal?
No.
What? All right. Okay, so now I have to ask another question. What level of shock pad would best secure this investment or this expenditure?
For this one, it's probably a 23 millimeter shock pad. But honestly, I would leave that up to the professionals who deal with this turf every day. The turf installers are going to tell us, and the designer, whoever gets the design part of the bid, they will spec that, specifically to the RFP. So, I'm thinking it's going to be a 23 millimeter just because that's what I've seen other places that are using the EnviroFill use. Greenwich High School is a pretty good example of that. I believe they use a 23 millimeter shock pad there, but that would be what I'd like to see. But if they recommend a thicker one, then it'll be thicker.
Right, thank you very much. And Mr. Moderator, if it's allowable or permitted, I'd be happy to yield my time to Representative Vergara.
Yeah, that's fine. She can come back, but I'm going to let Representative Steele go first.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jeff Steele, District 2. I have a question and then a comment. A question through you to Mr. Calabrese. We have 3 turf fields in town. Have there been any medical issues that you're aware of in all the time that we've had them because of the turf?
No, none to my knowledge.
Okay. So with that being said, I mean, I know that there's some concern amongst people and RTM members about the environmental aspect here. And, I would just say that by turfing it, we're not cutting the grass all the time. So we're not burning gasoline. We're not putting down insecticide. We're not putting down chemicals. We're not putting down weed killer. Would be one thing to consider. The second is, the field, the grass, if you walked it the other day or last week, it's in awful shape. I mean, there's potholes, the grass doesn't come up. It's in horrible shape as it is now. I don't even know how we fix that. That's just an observation. The third is we're putting all this money in. We just approved a Board of Ed budget that went up 10.5 million and it's for the kids. We all want to do things that are for the kids. Well, this is another thing for the kids because it is about education, it is about academics, it's about social skill building, but so much of many of our kids' lives is about sports. And our fields are in awful shape. And I'm so glad we're finally starting to tackle them one at a time. And I believe this needs to be done. We need to start getting on par with not only with other towns, but just improving our own fields. And to have something that's multi-use and that is going to be used with a product that's not going to create any hazardous medical condition, as we can see, and that might actually reduce some environmental contaminants alone is a good reason to do it. So that's just a comment, but thank you for answering the question.
Thank you, Representative Steele. Representative Galdenzi?
I'm sorry, I just need to make a point of information that we can't by law spray pesticides on our K-8 fields. So that is not an issue on this grass field right now. I just wanted to make that clear.
Mr. Moderator, through you to Mr. Calabrese. Thank you for using the 14-point document, by the way. I appreciate the structure. You started this quite a few years ago, you said initially. Have you done any research into the other, any of the new technologies that are around this?
Yeah, the EnviroFill is kind of the top of the line right now. So yes, that's part of the reason why we went with it, or why we're trying to go with it, I should say.
And what about more grass? And the research I've had to do independently, there's a lot of increased ways of growing grass and managing the fields. There's been any cost estimating or comparisons with those options?
So what I would love to do at some point when you guys are not busy is put on a field and turf clinic for the 40 of you and maybe all the rest of the funding bodies, because as Ms. Begara just pointed out, and I've got to state this again, we cannot use any kind of chemicals on our K-8 fields. We are currently all organic. If you try to grow anything organic, do it to your lawn. I mean, you'll see these people going no mow. I apologize if I'm offending any of you right now, but no mow May. That's what our fields look like right now, because you've got weeds popping up everywhere because we can't treat them. We've got broadleaf grass. It takes years of going organic to get those fields to take. So we've only started going organic the last, I think it was 2 years ago when we brought on the current vendor that we have. Prior to that, they didn't use pesticides. They used everything they could use within the law. And our fields were honestly a little greener, and I don't want to say they were nicer, but there's a turnover right now, and it's going to take us some time to build that turf. So that's what we're trying to do. But there's a lot of things working against us in the current environment. Not like a golf course. I'll argue till I'm blue in the face. We could spray things at our golf course. We can keep them green. That's the whole point of a golf course. We can't do that with our fields, especially when they're located at school facilities.
What would you say our annual cost to maintain a grass field is today?
One specific grass field without any severe, turf, sodding, things of that nature, about $60,000 for maintaining, mowing, watering, and lining. It's about $60,000 a field.
All right. In the document, you list the long range cost as none. What is the oldest field that we have today from a turf perspective?
Turf field oldest one would be Ludlow High School. Right now is the oldest one. That was returfed in 2015. Ward was done in 16, Tomlinson in 17. They were all put in about 12 years originally prior to that.
And what is the cost of removal to do a returf then?
To do a returf of one field is between $400,000 and $500,000 in a normal environment. I don't think we're in a normal environment at this point.
So our long range costs are another $500,000 with inflation, certainly to remove this field.
Correct.
All right. You were rather dismissive of Representative Vergara's question about the leaching into the watershed area. Why is that? Is meaning in the sense of why are you so confident that that's not an issue? There seems to be a lot of literature and concern about the chemical leaching, and it is a wetland. So how do we prevent that?
Well, number one, elevation. The wetlands where this field is, it's lower than where the wetlands that abut it are. So just natural gravity tells me that whatever infill we're putting isn't going to wash upwards down to eventually to the water. And then the second part, again, I'm not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination, so I don't deal with drainage on a daily basis, but turf fields typically can handle anywhere between 4 to 5 inches of rain per hour. So the water runs through them and goes where it's supposed to go. A grass field, if we're lucky to get it at 1 inch to 2 per hour, so it's twice as, it drains twice as fast, essentially. So I wouldn't say that I was dismissive of it. I just was pretty confident that it's not going to be an issue with where the placement of this field is.
You're not concerned that there's going to be any leaching of chemicals for all that rain that's passing through the fill issues and then going into where's the water draining into, if not the water basin?
Well, it'll go into the sewers, right? That's where it all drains. I would be more concerned that you're going to get more runoff off of the asphalt from the parking lots that we get now.
Okay. And one last question, I guess, is the price. You mentioned the price difference on the fills. How do we get that differential? I'm confused by it's difficult for me to get my head around the cost structure when there seems to be a lot of unknowns. The EnviroFill versus the next versus other options. You said you were going to get different options.
Yeah, in the RFP, correct. So we were pricing out the most expensive one, and that was what we did. So that will be the high end, right? So the bid's going to come in at the highest, which is what we again priced out. If that's out of our budget, out of the $4.1 million budget, let's say it comes in at 4.6 million, I've got 2 options here. One, I'm either coming back and going through the funding process again and asking for more money, or 2, I'm going to look at how much the ad alternate costs, which will be cheaper than the most expensive option.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Sorry, am I back? I disappeared there.
You are
back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Representative Galdenzi. Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9, through you, Mr. Moderator. Was Representative Vergara ahead of me, or is it my turn?
She has spoken already, so it's your turn. She can come back when everybody else is done.
Okay, through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Calabresi. Hi, Anthony. How are you?
Good, Drew. How are you?
I'm good. We've spoken of turf over the years. I have 2 questions I want to follow up on Mr. Steele's comment about medical issues. I'm not sure exactly what he was speaking of. I assume it was like cancer and medical issues in reference to the rubber and the
Yes.
potential.
Yes.
Anthony, would you know of, is this your opinion, or because you might not know yet of instances? And I also want to ask you, because when my kids were at Ludlow on the original field, and then on the replaced field, there was a lot of injury, ACL injuries, repetitive injuries. It seemed that the fields lent themselves to those kind of injuries versus grass. So I just want to say, I think it's all opinions and what's reported. Do you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Okay, great. My only other concern, I know when they built Ludlow Middle School, they had to move the wetland. Is that correct? The wetland was on the field and then they moved it to the location closer to the highway. Is that correct?
Honestly, I don't recall. I was here. I
Yeah, I think that's the case. So that concerns me that the fields exist where there was a wetland and then it couldn't be eliminated. So that's why they moved it to that location near the highway. Could you just make sure when the engineering is done that there's awareness of the original location, because that would impact runoff, maybe sponginess, maybe issues that we've dealt with at Sullivan Field. I'm also concerned about microplastics, whether it goes into the drain or into the wetland. Do you have a concern about microplastics leaching off these fields and into our waterways?
No, that's not necessarily, no.
Because you don't consider them microplastics because they're too large, or because that's not on your radar, or
No, I haven't heard this is a major concern for other turf field users, so I don't think it'll be an issue here.
okay, if you could pencil that down and just put it in a question to ask the installers, I'd appreciate it.
You got it.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Georgiadis. Representative Iacono.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Pam Iacono, District 8, through you to Mr. Calabrese. First of all, Anthony, thank you so much for such a thorough presentation. It's clear you're very well knowledgeable on this subject matter, and I really appreciate all that you're able to offer and answer on this subject. I just wanted to go on record that I am one of the proponents of supporting getting a full-size baseball field onto that lot. And if indeed we can move those ropes, as Representative Tallman has indicated he's heard we can, I would be fully supportive of that. Our high school athletic fields at Ludlow definitely need big improvements, and that would be a major step in the right direction for the sports program over there, and I support that since we're going to invest such a large amount of money into this project. I also wanted to just thank you too for looking at the parking over in that area. This is my district, and that's a tight configuration over there. We have all kinds of traffic issues when school lets out, and with high school parking, and that'd be a tremendous gain to get overflow parking there and to get cars off the road. So is that still in the works to get the extra parking in there?
That's what we're having them look at, yes.
That's fantastic. Thank you for having the foresight to pay attention to that. I really appreciate it. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Iacono. Representative Pistilli.
Sharon Pistilli, District 3, through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Calabrese. Hi, Anthony. I just had a quick adjacent question. Are we allowed, or has anybody ever spoken to, like, since we have such high demand for our fields and so much repair work to be done, do we have access to use the university fields?
That's a great question. We have approached both universities, Fairfield University and Sacred Heart. Believe it or not, both only have minimal time available for the town to rent. They do rent, they use them obviously for all their sporting clubs and teams, but then they do rent them out to other groups. So, but we have reached out to them, and again, there wasn't much time that they would be able to give us.
So like once May hits, they actually rent their fields out to other, so like camps and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it's camps. Another, a good one is youth lacrosse. Our Fairfield Youth Lacrosse is a very large program, and they rent a lot of fields from Fairfield U.
All right, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Pistilli. Representative Garskoff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you to Mr. Calabrese, please. Josh Garskoff, District 5. Okay, a couple things. One, Mr. Calabrese, you made the comment that the water that drains through the turf would go into the sewer. That's not accurate. It will go into the storm drain, and the storm drain goes into Long Island Sound. It directly goes into Long Island Sound, or a river that goes into Long Island Sound. I don't know exactly where this one goes. But water that drains through that turf is going to go into rivers and Long Island Sound. That's where it's going to go.
Thank you.
That's my comment. My question to you is, I just want to make sure, you probably said this and I missed it. With the add alternate, I know the Enviro product, that's your number one choice. What is the add alternate choice? What is it that the alternative would be?
The TPE that we were talking about earlier, which is like an encapsulated crumb rubber.
So it's still the waste material, but it's encapsulated.
That's correct.
What about, you mentioned also the virgin product that's been used.
It is virgin. I apologize if I'm using the word crumb rubber as interchangeable for that, but this is the virgin material. It's the same stuff that Westport did use on their fields.
So which is it? Is it virgin or is it encapsulated?
It's encapsulated virgin rubber. That's what it is.
Okay, so it's never been used as a tire or anything like that. It's been produced for this, and then it's also encapsulated.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Lowers the temperature, the surface temperature. That's why
Thank you. And that is the only single add alternate in terms of what product would be considered.
At the moment, yes. I mean, I don't have another one that I would consider.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Garskoff. Representative Spolier?
Hi, Marcy Spolier, District 4, through you to Mr. Calabrese. I was wondering how these fields and the turfing all plays into our Parks and Rec master plan. And I know with other things you've said in the past that you didn't want to act on them until the master plan was completed. And I'm just worried that we're I didn't know if we were jumping the gun here or if how that is incorporated, because, you know, we're talking about baseball fields and other fields, and I just didn't know how. I didn't want to jump the gun if this wasn't incorporated into our master plan. So if you could just give us a little bit of detail on that, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, of course. This is part of the master plan. We did include every project that we had on the waterfall chart that was currently in the works, I would say. So this turf field, the Sullivan South Pine turf field, we mentioned the potential for a turf field over at Tunxus Hill. We mentioned the turf field potentially at Ward High School. Any plans that we had plans for, we mentioned. We've also given them the master plans for the Burr Mansion, the Town Hall complex. Planning and zoning has their plan of conservation and development. We provided that. Pedestrian and Bike Committee has their plans. We gave them those plans. So any plan that has been created by a committee or task force for the town, if I had access to it, we provided it to the vendor to take into consideration when working on our master plan. So no, I don't think we're jumping the gun for this project.
I'm sorry, to follow up to that. So with the master plan, I thought there was like 15 specific sites that they were looking at being more detailed about. And you said you provided them with the information, but that doesn't mean that they took the information and made it one of the 15 top sites. So are any of the other possible sites for turf within those 15 sites, to your knowledge?
Yes.
And how many are in that?
Tunxus Hill off the top of my head is.
Okay, and you're not sure if there's any additional ones in those 15 sites?
I don't believe we included Fairfield Ward. That wasn't a big recreational site that I wanted a master plan for, or a conceptual plan. I think Burroughs Park was on there, I believe. Again, don't hold me to that. We've gone through this list several times. I do know Tunxus is on there. That one I've looked at multiple times now. So
would the high schools be part of the Parks and Rec master plan, or are they considered part of the education plan?
Well, they're part of the education plan, but we did ask the vendor to look at all of the school facilities as well. That includes the Giant Steps property. So, for future development and things of that nature. So I wanted an overview of those. And we also had them look at every open space, even though that falls under conservation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Spolier. Representative Longo?
Hi, thank you. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Calabrese. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I just had a couple of questions that were brought to my attention earlier this week about why the fields are locked, so that other residents, especially seniors, might want to be able to get into some of the fields when we aren't using them. Is that going to be an option for this field, or is that?
Yeah, well, I can answer. I think I can answer this one to the best of my ability. Some of the fields that are locked, and I'm thinking off the top of my head, the only one I've had a recent complaint about is Holland Hill, off the end of a dead end road. I believe it's Millendale. That the gate is locked. So during any property that is on any field or playground or anything that's on school property is not accessible to the public during the day at all. That was a safety rule that was put in post Sandy Hook. So any other park, and I'm thinking Burroughs Park, doesn't have a school property associated with it. Lincoln Park doesn't have a school property associated with it. Those should not be locked or enclosed from the public during the day. So those should be open. This property being on a school property, I would assume will be closed during the day to the public.
Okay, but after hours, is it accessible or not accessible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, after hours it would be.
Okay, okay, great. And I guess my next question was, and forgive me if this has been talked to death, but just one question about what you would use underneath, excuse me, the EnviroFill or the alternate, if that was the case. I didn't quite catch that, if we had an actual, specifically what would be used.
So underneath the EnviroFill is a shock pad.
Okay.
That was essentially what it was asked earlier, but that's okay.
Okay, sorry.
Nope,
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Representative Longo. Okay, Representative Vergara, you want to make another appearance with us?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jill Vergara for District 7. Sorry, Anthony.
I'm still here, Jill.
Questions.
Still here.
Well, so when you answered some of Representative Garskoff's questions, I kind of got a little confused. And so, and it was with respect to some of the products that you were vetting for the infill. And I think it would just be really helpful to get some spec sheets on those, on what you priced it out for, and also what the ad alternates would be. So the EnviroFill, I think that you've sent around that, but it would be helpful to do it to this body and then get some spec sheets on what you're calling TPE. What you're calling TPE is much different than what I am familiar with. What I understand TPE to be and what Westport put in was virgin plastic.
That's what I said.
But you said virgin rubber, and you said encapsulated rubber. So these products that are virgin are never encapsulated.
Okay.
Okay, so I just really want to get a sense. I think it's helpful for us to see the product that you're considering, and so spec sheets would be really helpful.
I'd be happy to check those out.
Okay, and so I wanted to go back to the maintenance issue, and I know that you've been saying that the maintenance isn't that extensive for turf, for artificial turf. Okay, that was the other clarification I wanted to make. When we say turf, it really can be grass turf, because I'm very supportive of having really, really fantastic grass turf all over the town and improving things in the way that Representative Gale was saying. And I think it would be great to have a mix of really good turf, artificial turf fields and excellent grass fields. The reason why we don't have excellent grass fields right now isn't just because you can't do it with grass. It's really not true. Other towns have been successful, and it's not a long-term type of thing. They've been successful one time around. They do the irrigation, they get the correct grass seed, they maintain it properly, and actually in the long term, it's less costly to maintain. This is how they're doing it in Massachusetts. And honestly, after all of the COVID pandemic stuff and a lot of other things. I've been looking at Massachusetts regulations, and they're really on to something. And I think that it would be great if we could follow some of this stuff. And they've shown in a lot of their different approaches to grass maintenance that it's highly successful and less costly. So I just want to slip that in because I think it's important for us as a town going forward long term. But with the maintenance issue right now, I am concerned that we're not maintaining our artificial turf properly. I want to hear the equipment that we have to maintain it, because as far as I understand, we're supposed to be doing things sort of weekly, like topping it off and also sweeping it and poofing it or something. And there are all these different things if you read the manufacturer's instructions that you're supposed to be doing if they are going to guarantee it for you. So what kind of equipment do we have to maintain our artificial turf?
So our contractors do have part of their contract to sweep the fields quarterly, which is what's recommended. So that's how often they get swept. We do, like I said, we do the testing for the G-force testing, the G-Max testing. I believe it's annually at the moment. It might be twice a year, but we do it annually. When locations, again, they do, I think 10 locations on the field. When something is low, more infill is added. So as far as I'm concerned, I believe we are doing everything we're supposed to be doing to maintain our turf fields, our artificial turf fields.
And are we checking it for temperature issues to make sure that it's not too hot for players to play on?
No.
We don't do that. Okay. And do we spray it? Because I've heard that you're supposed to spray it with, I don't know if it's antibacterial or what it is, but it grows organic compounds and gets really kind of nasty. So
yes, I know Tomlinson has been sprayed in the past because we had organic growth. It was like trees growing in the far corner in the shady area.
okay. I don't want to harp on this, but I do think when you read sheets from companies, they say that the maintenance costs are typically, not that far off of grass maintenance if you're really doing it properly. And I'm concerned because I did see those turf fields, the artificial turf fields that we have fail very early. So when we replaced them we replaced one in 2017. And I think it was way earlier than what the lifespan was supposed to be for that field for Tomlinson.
No, not Tomlinson.
And it, what?
Wasn't Tomlinson.
It wasn't Tomlinson in 2017. Was it Ward?
It might have been Ward. I know Ward had some issues, but I can't. Angeles could maybe speak to that later. I don't recall when that one was first installed, so I apologize.
Okay, because we put them in or replaced them in 2015, 2016, and 2017, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And I was under the impression, like when the one that I was involved in voting on, I think that was the 2017 one. It was way earlier than what we should have. It was way earlier than lifespan was projected to be. And there was all kind of crazy stuff because I called the contractor who put it in for us.
So
and
just
they
to
were,
try
like,
to speed this
bankrupt.
up, if I could just speed this up a little. So the lifespan
Sure.
is 10 to 12 years on a turf field. So if we put a field in 2007 and we replace it in 17, that's essentially 10 years. I mean, that's when we would expect to replace it. If we're proactively placing these on the waterfall chart, which we should be doing, we can plan this all out accordingly. So again, I am happy to take conversations offline, have any conversations you want. I don't think I need to waste anybody else's time tonight. I do think we've kind of beaten a dead horse here. So I apologize, but again, happy to answer any questions, any other questions.
Okay, I have like a lot of questions. So when we're talking about the total cost for this artificial turfing, you have to consider the whole life cycle costs. And I'm wondering whether when you answered Representative Galdenzi's question about what the replacement cost would be, and I think it was like $500,000, does that include disposal costs?
It does. That's what we've been doing, right? I think if I remember correctly, when we did Tomlinson, I think it was 387 or 487. I apologize. I know it was less than 500, but that included the disposal costs.
Okay, because I know that this country does not recycle them, so they just go into a large landfill or someone's backyard or something like that, right?
I don't know. I know they don't go into
Okay.
someone's backyard, but
And let's see.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator. I would just like to respectfully ask Representative Vergara to just ask these questions offline. They're not bad questions. They're not dumb questions, but could you have a lot? Could you send them in an email and have them just answer them one at a time? And then we can still all read them. I would just ask that we do this. I think you've kind of gone over time, and shouldn't we move this on? Not saying the questions are bad, but maybe we can have them answered offline.
I will put together my list of questions, but I want to say again, I just want to make a comment about my perspective as a parent here in town. I do believe that we've underinvested in our athletic infrastructure, and it's coming back at us really hard right now. And we're in like we're in a mode where it's triage. And it's unfortunate because I don't think that we can think about things fully. I have seen how athletics is so important to my kids and getting them outside and active with teams. And it's really important to me to invest in this infrastructure. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be turfing with artificial turf and artificial carpeting all over our town. It doesn't require that. I'm supportive of it to rest some of our fields, but I'm really would like to push on our administration, push on Anthony to investigate this, because there are towns that have been successful with doing this through grass management. And I think it's unfortunate that we're being pushed into this direction, even though I think a lot of parents just want good fields. They don't necessarily want artificial turf. They just want good fields, and that just takes good maintenance and some using good technology for grass as well.
Good, Jill. Thank you. I think you've got the point. I appreciate it. Representative Tallman, you have a point of info?
Yeah, just for reference, I know the schools, the trainers at the high schools take the temperature of the fields before the kids are allowed to go out and practice if it's a hot day. And in 5 or 6 years, I think they've closed them 2 or 3 times, but they do take the temperature of the fields at the high schools.
Thank you, Pete.
That's all. Thank you. Pleasure.
Are there any other questions from anybody who hasn't already asked a question? All right, so just Anthony, quickly, is there any going to be any sort of seating at this field, or dugouts? Is that all included, or is it just not?
Well, when in the initial plans concepts that we were talking about, we were including small sided bleachers. We were not including grandstands or anything of that nature. We weren't putting another Taft Field down there, or any of that kind of stuff. So it wasn't for like varsity football games, for example. We weren't even looking at, when we were talking baseball, we weren't talking about putting like a larger bleacher set like we have at Kiwanis Park. The bleachers that we would put would be smaller and obviously not on the field of play, so they'd be out of play. But we would do that in the design period.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, I guess you're done for tonight.
We'll get that information out to you guys tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Calabrese. All right, let's see. Item number 9 is the Board of Ed AC upgrade bonding. Mr. Papa George, Ms. Vitale, and Mr. Schmidt. Whoever wants to jump in and get rocking and rolling, we're ready for you.
I don't know if Ms. Vitale wants to jump in first.
Just a brief, before you is phase one of the district-wide air conditioning project. This project includes bringing air conditioning to North Stratfield Elementary School and Osborne Hill Elementary School. Those are the last of our 504 elementary schools that are not fully air conditioned. And it also expands air conditioning at Fairfield Woods Middle School. Right now, that school is about 45% air conditioned as compared to Roger Ludlow Middle School, which is 100%, and Tomlinson, which is about 90%. So we're moving this project forward. This project was approved by the Board of Education back at the end of January and has been approved by the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. We are asking for the full amount of the project to be approved tonight. However, in terms of cash flow and the bonding for this year, we're looking for a smaller amount just as the seed money. But I will let Mr. Papa George talk you through the details of that. Mr. Papa George, handing it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Vitale. As mentioned, I know by Mr. Schmidt and Ms. Vitale, it is a large number you see before you, the $22 million. That you see before you, for those of you that are familiar with other large school capital projects, the state does require us to ask for full bonding or full costs of projects up front in order to be accepted as a state project for reimbursement by the state. We have recently received information that there will be state funding available for air conditioning and indoor air quality projects. So we are hopeful to be able to receive some type of reimbursement on this project. That being said, we've also reached out to the state, and there is at this time no guidance as to the proper procedures or applications that are going to be put into place for this type of reimbursement. However, speaking with the group up at the Oscar office, they believe that it will be similar to other school construction projects. So we've chosen at this time to move forwards with that in mind and keeping that process the same as we do with other large improvement projects in the schools. As Ms. Vitale said, this would take our two elementary schools and our middle school and bring them up to comparison with most of the other district schools in town. We have just to give you a little brief history, also the number you see, the 22.7 million, we commissioned DTC to come out. They evaluated all the buildings, and we had conceptual designs and conceptual pricing put into place. That's where the numbers came from for this project. Again, following the state requirements for reimbursement, this project will be turned over to a building committee, and they will receive an approved ed spec and work off of that to make this project successful. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm sure there's a bunch of them.
Okay, thank you, Angelos. Representative Bateson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. Through you to Ms. Vitale. Christine, you said in your brief comment, can you tell me where we are with Tomlinson and Fairfield Woods when it comes to air conditioning, percentage-wise?
Tomlinson is 90% air conditioned, and Angela's correct me if I'm wrong, and Fairfield Woods Middle School right now is about 45% air conditioned.
All right. The Ludlow Middle School, is that 100%?
That's 100%.
Okay.
Newer construction.
All right. North Stratfield, am I to assume there's nothing in there? Maybe admin, that's it?
That's correct. There's some small areas based on special needs students, so there are some split units spread throughout the building, but that would be all for the building.
Okay, in the packet, Angelos, that you gave us, I see the 10-year waterfall. I'm assuming that's the current one that the board's working off of. If I look at that, I see some good-sized dollar amounts for the high schools. When I say that, over the 10 years, maybe several $1 million each. But the only big projects I'm seeing in that 10-year waterfall now are Jennings for 33 million and Osborne Hill for 6.5. Is that? I'm just trying to ballpark the capital needs for education for the next 10 years, and those are the only two big numbers I'm seeing. Is that correct?
That is what you see on that sheet. That sheet that we provided to you, the waterfall, is the board approved, voted on and approved waterfall. Since that has come out and the air conditioning priority was given to us by the board, we have sat and we are currently reviewing that to work on some cash flows. We've also worked with the first select woman and her working group for capital projects. So we've kind of been given a target number for each of the years moving forwards. So we're currently working through making the waterfall chart fit within that target number with the years moving out. So what you are looking at is the approved Board of Education waterfall, but it is subject to a lot of change coming up.
Okay, what's the 6.5 million for Osborne Hill? I see it towards the end of the capital. What is there an addition we're planning on there, or is that a renovation?
There's bathrooms that need to be upgraded at Osborne Hill. That's part of it.
That was, and also that was a, so I'm working on pulling it up as I'm speaking here, but I believe that project was part of the bathrooms. It was part of a entrance safety vestibule, and also enclosing the walkway between the annex building and the building itself.
Okay, in Osborne Hill, that number looks a little low for air conditioning. Is there residual air conditioning from when that was BOE headquarters?
There is some air conditioning, again, throughout the building and areas, but nothing overall. The annex building and the library are two examples of areas that are air conditioned.
How have we done with due diligence on this with your contractors? Angela, I mean, you do this. I mean, this is, when we look at a building, I mean, not that Woods is that dated, but doesn't it worry you when we go in and do projects of this magnitude? I mean, when we open up these walls and ceilings and look in there and we find other stuff, we have to relocate fire safety. Is that all stuff that we've already looked at? I mean, are you worried about contingency, anything?
I am not at this time. As I mentioned, we commissioned DTC. They went in, evaluated the buildings. We looked at stuff like modification of sprinkler systems. We looked at power coming in from the grid. Do we have enough power in the building to run these new equipment? We even looked at, for instance, if we're dropping the ceilings in the hallway to put up ductwork and then put up a new ceiling, are we going to put up existing T12, T8 lights, or are we going to put LED lights back up as we're moving forward through the building? So that's all stuff that was encountered when we talked with DTC. And as I mentioned, these are conceptual pricing based on concepts that they provided to us. Once we give direction to a building committee, as you know, they always have the ability to look at all options on the table, whether it's heat pumps, split units, VAVs. So there is a lot of options out there. As you know, the state does require us to ask for the money up front. I think my personal belief is it's kind of a backwards to ask for the money before we actually have designs and plans in place. That's why we do work with companies like DTC to come up with conceptual pricing.
Okay. Conceptually, I'm not at peace with the magnitude of these numbers. Christine, to your board, I need, if this is your priority, if this is what you want, that's fine. But I got to tell you, you got to start taking other stuff off that waterfall, or you got to start considering it, or start pushing stuff out into the future. I mean, you set your priority. You want AC, that's what it is. But other school communities are going to suffer because of this, or their projects are going to be prolonged. You need to communicate that to your board. And I mean, this stuff's expensive. And, you know, Angeles, I don't envy you in this position for the simple fact that you're right. The process is backwards, but I don't have to tell you, the supply chain, these issues are not going away. And HVAC material is just, it's crazy. I mean, supplies are limited. I'm scared you're going to get quotes back whenever you do this. Hopefully, these supply chain issues are going to be resolved in 18 months. We get back to some sense of normalcy. But I tell you, I would not be surprised if we saw anywhere from 20 to 40% inflation on these numbers just for material alone. And I'm sure you got to be seeing this in your industry because you're seeing it in any commercial development. So I respect the board that this is where your priority is. I'm going to go along with this, but you know, Christine, to your board, please reassess this plan,
We're going
your
to be,
capital plan.
we have a facilities committee that has been newly formulated over the last few months, and that committee will be taking a close look at all of the projects moving forward, looking at the waterfall. The waterfall was approved by the Board of Education just for presentation. It is a living document, so it changes. We don't vote on it every time it changes. We did vote before it was presented to the town bodies for the Capital Waterfall Summit, but it's a work in progress. You know, we realize that we have to work within a certain bonding capacity, but in terms of air conditioning and bringing mechanical means of fresh air into the building, it is a priority. We've heard from our community, from parents. We view it as a health and safety issue for everyone in the building, but also for the building itself, just in terms of heat and humidity and molds and the health of the structure. We are cognizant of the fact these are town assets, and we feel we have a responsibility to keep the climate in the building a healthy one for people in the building as well as the building itself. But I hear you, Ed.
Thank you, Representative Bateson and Ms. Vitale. Representative Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you, John Kuhn, District 7, through you to Ms. Vitale and Mr. Papa George. Hey, Christine, I sent you stuff over the weekend. I think you know, and I apologize to everybody, but it's something I just recently came across. I have an old classmate who lives in Windsor, and he was telling me about how they were able to utilize HVAC purchase agreements and PPA purchase agreements to mitigate the expenses that they needed to take to similarly install air conditioning in schools and town buildings and that sort of thing. Essentially, almost defraying virtually all the costs. And I wonder if we come across any of this, spoken to any of these people. He cited one particular company. I can't remember if he used it or not, but the company Block Power. They do HVAC purchase agreements. They've done it for the city of Ithaca. You know, is this a way for us to reduce this big nut?
Can I?
Angelos, I don't know if you want to take that.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. I just made a note. I believe you said Black Power was the name of the group.
Block Power, BLOC Power.
Okay, Block.
And my friend is happy to talk with all of us, any of us.
I would actually welcome reaching out to them. I actually have not heard of a PPA agreement for HVAC equipment, and I did hear you bring it up earlier. So I actually texted while I was sitting here with one of my managers for construction who does a lot of our PPA work, and he had not either. So we would both be interested in reaching out and speaking to your contacts there. If you don't mind, I would reach out to you and get some contact information.
Yeah, absolutely. He was very happy, very open to discussing it.
Absolutely. We're always open to saving wherever we can.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative Kuhn. Representative Vergara.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. Jill Vergara for District 7. Wow, Representative Kuhn, that is so cool if that can come to fruition and we do PPA agreement for the HVAC or are able to reduce some of that cost. That would be really cool. I agree with you, Christine, when you said that this is a health and safety issue and also a risk mitigation issue. We saw it with Coley Town. It can become so expensive if we don't take care of these issues and climate control and the mold in a coastal town. So I really highly appreciate that you're prioritizing this. I think it's very important. And I want to emphasize that risk mitigation element. And I'm so happy to hear that the state is giving funding for standalone HVAC projects now. It was concerning and upsetting and frustrating when they weren't. So I'm glad that this has changed around. Can you review again which schools still aren't fully air conditioned? I'm not sure I heard the full list. Could you state which other schools are remaining at Tomlinson, Jennings, Dwight, Ward, and Ludlow High School after this?
After this.
Okay, those are the 5 remaining.
And parts of Giant Steps building is still not.
Parts of Giant Steps. Okay.
If this moves forward.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Representative Garb. Representative Woke.
Jay Woke, District 5. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just to reiterate a little bit with Representative Bates, and I'm for what Representative Bates had said. He made some good points, and the money is an issue, and this chain of goods coming into our country is not doing very well right now. But I have to say that Chairman Vitale, that I've been an advocate for air conditioning for, I guess, ever since I've come on the RTM. So I'm happy that this is even on the table and we're talking about it. I mean, this hasn't been talked about in years. Every time I brought it up, it was like taboo. You know, nobody wanted to deal with it. So finally, it's actually coming into tuition, and little by little, we'll get this done. And then finally, just a reminder, a memory that I came about is I remember going to a meeting, a Board of Ed meeting, Chairman Vitale, where the board was I think it was about winter break, and winter break was taken away only for a good reason, only for the fact that the parents were complaining about that they
think we lost them.
How about now? I'm back. So anyway, I'll end it on that. So maybe winter break and come back to the kids. So thanks for all you're doing. I'm very happy to hear that air conditioning is finally happening in our schools.
Thank you, Representative Volk. Representative Iacono.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you to Chairman Vitale. Mrs. Vitale, I want to follow up on what Representative Bateson said. I agree that you all need to prioritize your waterfall. I don't want to leave it as that this is a work in progress. I would like to know from you, what is your deadline? When are you going to have this on an agenda? I would like you to go back to your board, and I would like to have a firmly established response date as to when you are going to provide the town with an updated waterfall. I know you're working on a facilities commission. I know that you've been told by the state that you need to have a deadline to get your racial imbalance plan in place by September. I'd like the same deadline from you on when you're going to update your waterfall chart. And I'd like to suggest that you have that to us by September, the same time you have your racial imbalance plan in place as well. So, but I'll leave that to you to discuss with your board. I think the biggest obstacle to getting projects done is not having an end date. And, from the Board of Education, I think that you guys need to be held to a little bit tighter timeline, a little bit tighter, stricter schedule, and you need to be held a little bit more accountable as to when you're going to respond to things. You have a massive waterfall list that needs to be addressed. Many of us are extremely supportive of those projects, most especially the air conditioning. But as you just heard, some of our other representatives complaining that we haven't been able to invest money on the town side. We really need to know what your priorities are and where they are and what they're going to cost so that we can start to invest in totality for the town and to the Board of Education. So that's my ask to you. You can take it to leave it or leave it. I hope that you do take it to heart and bring it to your board and ask them to get a firm, detailed response timeline back to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Iacono. And as you know, the Board of Education is working with Ms. Kupchik's working group to create a 5-year capital plan. So our waterfall will be tying in to the town's projects. We appreciate that we don't operate in a vacuum. So the work will be happening concurrently. And when I say the waterfall is a living document, that does not mean that the Board of Education is not cognizant of changing it and updating it. As you know, it very often changes based on needs. The needs of the building, things happen, roofs fail, boilers fail, priorities change within the community, and we have to respond to that. But we also appreciate that we do have a fiscal responsibility of the town. We have worked with the first.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Vitale. I just want you to take that message back to the board. Thank you very much.
Ms. Iacono, we'll take that message back to the board, but I just wanted to provide you a little, and the RTM with a little more insight of how the board has been operating on this. But thank you, and I will definitely relay that message to my fellow board members.
Thank you. Representative Horton.
Thanks, Margaret Horton, District 9. I think my question's actually been answered maybe by some previous people, but just to confirm, I mean, I want to be obviously very cognizant of spending, but it's not really an option to not have air conditioning in schools, correct? Because is that right? Because of the safety issues to kids, we have to, I mean, I don't really see another option but moving forward. Am I missing something with that?
We view it as a priority, and I think this town has viewed it as a priority. We've been bringing air conditioning into our buildings typically as part of school renovations.
Sorry, I should have clarified. They can't open the windows. Is that correct? During the school day?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is definitely, things have definitely changed since post Sandy Hook with some of the safety protocols that are in place. Doors are no longer allowed to be opened. Windows are not allowed to be opened on the ground level, which does affect the airflow in the building. And as well as for some of these systems, how these HVAC systems even work. But Mr. Papa George, I don't know if you want to add anything to that from a technical standpoint, as you know better, the systems in our building.
No, I think you hit it on the head. Just not being able to open the ground floor windows does affect our indoor air quality issues with our DOAS systems as well. Some of the older DOAS systems rely on open windows to move the air through the buildings.
Okay, thank you. That answers it. I don't really see another option if we can't have ground floor windows open for our kids. My kids are on the ground floor in their school. You know, they've got to have clean air coming in. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to Ms. Vitale, thank you very much for coming tonight. I have been following this air conditioning issue for a while. The school in my district, Sherman School, was recently finally, I think, completed their air conditioning. So thank you for, they had a renovation and it was finally completed, because prior to that, I would hear from constituents that they were taking their kids out of school because there was no air conditioning. We've dealt with enough learning loss, and to have additional learning loss because the school's 90 degrees is hard. And I know you deal with a lot of issues, since the Board of Education does not work with a surplus, that you do have to move money around. When my boys were in Ludlow, I want to say I appreciated at Fairfield Ludlow High School, just to trying to get the windows upgraded, from the 1972 windows, so that the heat wasn't surging in that section of Ludlow where my kids could barely work. So I do want to ask a question, which goes back to Mr. Bateson. Do you think delaying this would save any money? I know from our experience with Smith Richardson Clubhouse, we were given a $3 million cost. We voted it down. We came back and we ended up spending over $7 million on the facility. So do you think delaying this any number of years is going to save us money? Or will things just get more expensive? They always do, so I'm just asking.
They always do. I don't think that delaying it will save us money. I think that by starting with the smaller amount that we're asking for, starting with the seed money and having the plans finalized over the next year, hopefully the market will stabilize and some of the supply chain issues that we've been facing over the last 2 years will rectify and thereby bring down prices. But that's just my opinion.
So you don't think if we wait around for 3 or 4 years for the supply chain issues to resolve themselves, that this would cost the town less money?
I don't, but that's just an opinion. That's not
Okay,
based on any
thank-
financial analysis that I've done and based on just the way it has,
Yeah, past
you
experience.
talk about Fairfield Ludlow High School. I was one of those parents that advocated for adding air conditioning to Fairfield Ludlow High School when we did the renovation for the windows. And at that time, it was viewed to be cost prohibitive because it was 8 million, and now the price tag is over 20 million. So,
Exactly. Yeah, no, you and I had kids in that school at the same
right?
time.
I mean, we were there advocating.
We were
for that.
there and they were roasting. So thank you very much for your continued attention to this air conditioning issue. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. To Chairman Vitale and maybe Mr. Papa George, I'm Hannah Gale, District 6. My question is about air exchange, and does air conditioning encompass air exchange? Because I being in the medical field, that is our top priority right now, is increasing the amount of air exchange going on in a room, and I wonder if you're considering that. Thank you.
Mr. Papa George, why don't you take that one?
So we use, in the schools, we use two different systems. We use VAV rooftop units, which do bring fresh air into the buildings. In other buildings, we have what is commonly known as a cassette system. So it circulates air in the building, and those buildings have standalone DOAS systems. So that is how you get your fresh air in there for that type of system. So those are the two common types that we use throughout the district.
And do you know what the air exchange rate is in these schools?
I don't have that.
Entity?
I don't have that information off the top of my head. I do know that since COVID hit and we reopened buildings, we have been running our buildings wherever possible with a 100% outside air damper setting. So we are bringing as much fresh air into the buildings as we can. We have had to make some adjustments based on heat, humidity. It was more harmful than good to have 100% humidity probably going in some areas, but for the most part, we are running 100% fresh air.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Pistilli.
Sharon Pistilli, District 3. I just have one related comment when we went through the schools that do not have full air conditioning right now. So I have a daughter with asthma who struggled to breathe in our schools, and she was Jennings Woods Ward and had no school that was completely air conditioned, and is now going to be a sophomore in college. And there was learning loss for her as a result of there not being air conditioning in the building. So as much as I hate the price tag, unfortunately, we are where we are with this. So thanks. That's it.
Thank you, Representative Ruggiero.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I was trying to turn I got my camera on. Sorry. I just wanted to ask, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you, wanted to ask Mrs. Vitale a few questions. How many days a year, do we know how often we use the air conditioning in the schools that have the air conditioning today?
I don't have that data off the top of my head, Angela. I don't know if you do, but I just want to caution that it's not just cooling, it's also mechanical marines of fresh air. It is just the exchange of, as Representative Gale was pointing out, that it's upgrading those systems to allow for more air exchange. But Angela, I don't know if you have any data by how many days that we've fully run the air conditioning.
I can tell you, unlike heat, the state does not have a set guideline for when we have to offer air conditioning in buildings. They do for heat. So we don't just jump and turn it on a specific date. We wait until the weather outside mandates that we do it. For instance, this year, we have not turned it on. This is the first week we're actually firing up air conditioning for the buildings. So the ones that do have it are starting to get it this week.
And they're using that just now, starting the air filtration as well?
No, the circulation of air has been running runs year round. So a lot, like I mentioned, we have DOAS systems and we also have rooftop units that are bringing in fresh air. It's the actual, like your house probably has a condenser unit outside. So it's those condensers to make it easy to understand that we're starting to fire up at this point. Our systems run 24/7. We go into occupied and unoccupied based on the time of day of the week it is, so we can control how much energy we're using. We do maintain, even through the winter and summer, we maintain unoccupied temperatures even when the buildings are not occupied. This helps control the cost of trying to start it up first thing in the morning and bring buildings down to a cooler temperature all at one time. If we maintain a slightly higher temperature during unoccupied and a slightly lower temperature during occupied time.
Sorry about that. Do we close the schools if when there's a heat index that's expected? Do all the schools, because they all have to close at the same time, correct? So are we losing days due to the heat? At the end of the year when it gets super hot?
We have had days that we've had early dismissals when the heat index was too high.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions on this item? Representative Fury?
Yeah, Marty from District 1. I just have a question. I know with COVID, the last 2 years, the classrooms that had air conditioning, they weren't allowed to use them because they were afraid to move the air in the classroom. Is that going to be an issue going forward with air conditioning and COVID?
We have never stopped using our air conditioning systems. We stopped using pedestal fans in the classrooms because of COVID. We didn't want air blowing across, but our central air systems have MERV 13 filters in them, so we've never stopped using them.
So central air you could use, because my daughter's at Dwight and they have like a wall unit and they weren't allowed to use that, and it was tough.
We did shut down the split units for a period of time because they are unable to handle a MERV 13 filter. So we treated them like almost like a classroom fan. So it would just be pulling air in from the classroom and blowing it right back out. And those are unable to have a MERV 13 filter. They have a much lower MERV rating. So we did stop using them for a period of time.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Peter Tallman.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, Angela, through you to Angeles. When they do these new fittings, are they going to be going over the controls like the thermostats and stuff like that? Because I think I told you, I walk through school sometimes and one room is like 65, the hallway 75, another room is, and I'm sure every school is different, but especially with what the fuel is going to cost, I assume this is coming off of the grid, but maybe this will be a time for the town to revisit the solar panels at the train station. Anyway, back to the controls. Are they going to be redoing those? So
we've actually started with buildings that are not on this list to add air conditioning. We've started doing controls upgrades. Currently, Ludlow High School and Tomlinson are under that. And included in these pricing for the air conditioning would be controls upgrades as well.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Cinto.
Hi, Kelly Cinto, D9. I'm not quite sure who this is directed towards, but can someone please repeat the number that Jennings is projected at? Was it 22 million? Did I mishear that?
22 million was the total for the phase 1 of the projects, which was North Stratfield, Osborne, and Fairfield Woods.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Representative Gale.
Sorry to bother you again, but just thinking about Mr. Bateson's comment, if you begin to find that the markups on these items are just so high and the supply chain issues are really driving costs, would you consider simply spreading this out over a longer waterfall?
I think that's something that we would have to consider. If it turns out that the budget is not accurate, I mean, we spent a lot of money to hire DTC to go out and assess our buildings, so we are confident in these numbers. But if the situation changes, that would be a decision, for the building committee to come back to the Board of Ed and ultimately other town bodies in terms of timeline.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I think that's a wrap on that. So cool. And the next one, item number 10 is the Fairfield Ward High School HVAC rooftop units. Is everybody HVAC out, or do we have any questions on this item? All right. That's going to be it for that. We're going to go, everybody has their phone numbers for the breakout committee meetings. And I'll see everybody next Monday night. Have a great week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mark.
Josh, is LNA staying here or no? I'm going to go with no.
Sounds like a no to me.